Hello, my name is Dympna Furlong and I work in the Agri-Environment Division of the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine. I am talking to you today about the Agri-Climate Rural Environment Scheme, also known as ACRES, and I will be giving you a brief talk on the terms and conditions. And before we start, while the ACRES is part of the CAP strategic plan, and while it has been approved by the Commission, there are still certain steps to be taken at national level. So at the moment, this is the draft scheme, and when the CAP strategic plan is approved with all the component schemes, it will then become the final scheme, at which time we will release the full information. So what is ACRES? ACRES is the Agri-Climate Rural Environment Scheme. It replaces the Green Low Carbon Agri-Environment Scheme, GLAS, and it also builds on the learnings from GLAS and the results-based environment agri-pilot project in which some of you may have participated in the last year. So how is ACRES different from GLAS? Well, first of all, there are two approaches within ACRES. There's an ACRES cooperation approach, and that's available in zones identified on the basis of certain environmental criteria. And one of my colleagues will be talking further about that later on in this recording. And the ACRES General, and that's available nationally outside the CP zones. Another difference from ACRES, from GLAS, is there are different types of actions. There are prescription actions like what was in GLAS, where there's a set payment made for satisfactory completion of the tasks. There are also results-based actions where the rate of payment will depend on the score achieved, and these were the type of actions that were trialled in REAP. So who can apply for ACRES? Well, for the ACRES General approach, that's open to all categories of active farmers nationally outside the ACRES cooperation zones. And then the ACRES cooperation, that's open to all categories of active farmers eligible in the defined mapped area for ACRES CP zones. So my colleague will be talking further about those. So how am I eligible for ACRES? Well, first of all, a farmer must be aged 18 years or over on the date of the submission of the application. They must hold an active business ID and meet the definition of an active farmer. Have all your lands farmed, declared in your name on the Integrated Administration and Control System, that's the department's IACS system. Have submitted a BPS application in 2021 and have all scheme lands declared in your 2022 BPS and in BIS for the subsequent years of participation in ACRES. So which ACRES approach am I eligible for? Now there's a number of ways in which you can find out which approach you are eligible for. First of all, you can log into AgFood and go to the ACRES Access Agreement, or your advisor can log on to AgFood, go to the Expression of Interest tab, and then Access Agreement to see which approach you are eligible for. The other way you can find out which approach is to send a text saying DAFM ACRES, followed by your herd number to 50124, and the response will indicate which ACRES approach you're eligible for. So for example, what you send in your text is DAFM space ACRES space A 1234567. So the core requirements for ACRES are: you must engage an approved ACRES advisor, and FOSS advisors are currently being trained by the department, and their names will go up on the department's website. And as part of ACRES, it's now a requirement to submit a farm sustainability plan, but your advisor will prepare that as part of the application form. Now, the participants in the ACRES cooperation approach must engage and work with the ACRES cooperation project CP teams. And like GLAS, there is mandatory training. So there is attendance at a training course, ACRES training, in your first year of participation in the scheme. And if you're in the ACRES cooperation approach, you must attend any additional mandatory training by the ACRES CP teams. And like GLAS, there's also record keeping. So how to apply for ACRES? First of all, as I said, you engage an approved ACRES advisor, and they prepare and submit the application on your behalf. And that application is accompanied by a farm sustainability plan. And there is currently, the department has made available a draft system for advisors to commence preparing those. All applications are made based on an individual business ID, and a farmer can only submit one application. And as I've said previously, a farmer must have a 2021 BPS and all scheme land declared in 2022 BPS. Now, the structure of acres general. Like GLAS, there will be 3 tiers. Tier 1 is the priority environmental assets. Tier 2, there's certain conditions if you have certain types of farms or are prepared to do certain types of actions. And Tier 3 is general actions. Now, like GLAS, if you qualify Tier 1, that gives you priority access over people in Tier 2, which in turn gives you priority access over people in Tier 3. How to qualify for Acres General Tier 1. So for this, a farmer must commit to completing appropriate mandatory actions relevant to the priority environmental assets on your farm, with those assets being private natura, commonage, geese and swans area, breeding wader mapped areas, catchments identified as having high status water, actions appropriate to local needs identified in the farm sustainability plan, and conservation of rare breeds. And also registered organic farmers will also qualify for priority access under this tier. How to qualify for Acres Tier 2. There are a number of options whereby you may apply for access to the scheme under Tier 2. If your lands include a vulnerable water area, or if you are a participant in the Native Woodland Establishment Scheme, or GPC 11 agroforestry, or you adopt at least one of the 3 planting actions, or if you have a whole farm stocking rate, whether beef, dairy or sheep, greater than 130 kgs livestock manure nitrogen per hectare produced on the holding, or you have more than 30 hectares of arable crops. In that last category where I mentioned the livestock manure nitrogen per hectare produced, or the 30 hectares of arable crops, there's certain mandatory actions that you have to choose from if you fall within those 2 categories. And all this information is available from your Acres advisor and also on the department's website at www.gov.ie/acres. And on that screen, you will see this layout. And under item 1, what is the proposed Agri-Climate Rural Environment Scheme Acres? If you press on that, within that, there's a document called Overview. And the list of all the actions in Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, plus what actions you have to do under those categories is available there. And if you want to see the draft specifications for each action, that's available under heading number 2, Acres Information for Advisors. So there's a lot of information currently available on the department's website. And as I said, this is draft at the moment of such time as the CAP strategic plan is approved. So the draft terms and conditions, the full draft terms and conditions will be going up on the website as soon as possible. And as I said, when the scheme is approved, all of this information will go up on the website. Thank you.
Thanks, Dympna. I'm Ciara O'Neill from the Cooperation Project side of the house here in the department. I'll give you some information on the cooperation approach of Acres, and you'll get more detailed technical explainers later in the recording from colleagues in the inspectorate. Acres cooperation applies in the 8 map zones which have been identified as of being high environmental priority by an interdepartmental working group, including representatives from here in the department, from the National Parks and Wildlife Service, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Local Authorities Water Programme. These areas are of high nature value, hold significant carbon stores, and are home to some of the most pristine waters in the country. The Cooperation Project, or CP approach, is qualitative rather than prescriptive. That means that the lands inside the 8 zones will be assessed using results-based scorecards. This approach has been successfully trialled in schemes like the Burn Project and EIPs like the Hen Harrier Project, which both had local dedicated teams on the ground. We're scaling this up now and rolling it out at a national level, so each of the 8 zones has the benefit of a dedicated CP team to help implement the scheme. These teams are made up of project managers, admin staff, and experts such as ecologists, hydrologists, ornithologists, and environmental scientists, field officers, and farm advisors. Using this breadth of knowledge and experience, they will collaborate with you to get to know your land, its habitats, and advise on how to maintain and improve the habitats on your land. After all, an improved habitat will mean an improved payment. Not all holdings will fit neatly inside or outside the map zones, so there's a threshold rule for entry to the CP measure. Farmers with greater than or equal to 3 hectares or 20% of their holding, whichever is the lower, declared as forage or habitat in their 2021 BPS within an acre CP zone may only apply for the CP approach. Where a holding crosses more than one CP zone, you'll be assigned to the zone that has the largest proportion within. If your farm has land inside and outside of the CP zone, and you're accepted into the CP measure using the threshold rule, you will be able to choose actions from the general list on those lands outside of the CP zone. This will be demonstrated in case studies later in the webinar. Your core payment will come from the score achieved using the Habitat scorecard. We'll delve deeper into this results-based approach in the presentation from Pamela Boyle later in the recording. Your CP team will work with you to identify the habitats on your farm and provide best practice advice on habitat maintenance and improvement. Your advisor will score your habitat in summer 2023, providing your base scoreline. So how can you improve your habitat, your score, and ultimately your payment? Well, this is where the collaboration between you, your advisor, and your local CP team will come into play. You can see on the screen here some examples of the actions to improve your payment, and we will explore the benefit of non-productive investments and landscape actions in far more detail in John Carty's presentation later in the webinar. So on to the timelines. Our IT department tell us that many of you have already taken the first step with your advisors and expressed interest in acres cooperation. The screen will very shortly be open for your advisor to prepare and submit your farm sustainability plan and then commit to the terms and conditions of acres, with the ranking and selection taking place in December of this year. If successful, your contract will begin in 2023 in January. As seen earlier in the terms and conditions slides, you must submit your BIS application in spring next year to be eligible for your acres payment. In summer 2023, your habitats will be scored, and in collaboration with your CP team, you may choose to do some non-productive investments and/or landscape actions to improve your score and your payment. And as has always been the case, payments will issue in the fourth quarter of 2023. Thank you very much for listening. All the details are available on our website, so you can go to the homepage here of gov.ie, and as Dympna showed you, this acres homepage, where we will in the very near future be posting the contact details for your local CP teams. Thank you.